Three, two, one. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Your Course of Action. Today we got Tristan Senycia on the show to talk about how to grow your e-commerce business and a bit of business advisory type stuff. So yeah, how's it going, Tristan?
Yeah, not too bad. So my name's Tristan Senycia, and currently I'm focused on working for a not-for-profit organization called Business Station that runs the Digital Solutions Program. And so that's like a federally funded program that helps small businesses with 20 employees or less access really cost-effective advisory services.
Yeah.
And so in order to kind of participate, you need to have 20 or less as staff. You need an ABN, so you need to be registered in Australia, and you have to be for-profit. I also am involved in like a startup vault, which is a collective of startup coaches and non-executive directors. And yeah, effectively that's located in the UK. So part of the reason why I'm back is obviously related to COVID.
Yeah.
And so now I've got a little bit more of an international perspective on things, which I can bring back home.
Yeah, awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. So before we get started talking about business advisory, what got you into becoming a business advisor in the first place?
Yeah, so originally I was working for a company called U-Team, which is still going. They went through the Y Combinator program, and they've managed to grow to about 30 to 40 people. They originally started across in Ukraine and the UK, and then they moved across to the US. And what I found, I was working for them as a consulting product manager.
Yeah.
And helping companies or individuals that were wanting to create apps do their product visioning stage, which is a really important phase to go through if you're creating new technology. And yeah, I spoke a little bit about one of the projects that I did across here at Morning Startup. And what I increasingly found is that people were obsessed with the implementers, like the designers and the developers. And of course they're important. We can't, not have them actually deliver the app. But at the same time, I had an increasing appreciation for the importance of the planning and strategy phase. And so I created, a couple of years ago, I created like an advisory service related to product management.
Okay.
So that we could take a look at product visions that had been created by founders and make sure that they were thoroughly reviewed from a variety of perspectives.
Yep.
So yeah, that's where it sort of originated from. But then across in Australia, there aren't as many tech startups as across in Europe, for example.
Yeah.
It's more small business, right?
Yeah.
And so I could repurpose a lot of that same knowledge and sort of cross the chasm between the product world and more along the lines of the business advisory world.
Yeah. So by product management, do you mean like a physical product, or do you mean like a service product and maybe like a tech-based product? Is that what you mean by product?
More like SaaS, like
Okay.
software as a service, like platforms, phone apps, these kind of things. So I was involved in sort of helping commercialize a lot of these ventures across in the UK.
Yeah.
I still have some involvement with that, but obviously,
Yeah.
you only get so much time in a day to kind of work
true.
on everything.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So given that you've advised hundreds of small businesses in the past, what patterns have you noticed? What's preventing small businesses from being more successful?
Yeah. So I've been calling and kind of consulting on the phone to a whole variety of businesses, predominantly in Queensland. So calling some very beautiful places like Coronda, Sunshine Coast, where else, like near the Whitsundays, and a whole variety of different businesses anywhere from pet cemeteries to people making vodka to e-commerce businesses and everything in between. So the more successful founders, I would say, are the ones that have gone through a bit more of a considered coaching process. And so, yeah, certain people have actually left the digital solutions program and have gone off and gotten themselves a coach. But obviously you need to really consider who that needs to be, because you can't just choose anyone, right?
Yeah.
So came across a guy who's, I think, turning over 7 figures in the e-commerce space at the moment. And, he's just a super proactive guy. He saw, even though his business is going well, he still reached out. He still jumped on the phone. We still had an hour conversation because there was still value that could be created. And so a couple of things that really jump out at me that companies kind of struggle with is that they're quite inward looking in the sense that, they're not looking beyond their kind of a bit of a traditional HR structure in terms of who can help them, right? That doesn't go for every founder, but often it's the case that everyone's building their own little castle, yeah. And there's a lot of similar businesses. So, for example, when I look at Google Maps, and I actually see where this company, this like random little operation is operating in Queensland, for example, I'll notice that they've got a similar business just down the road. Yeah. And depending upon market conditions, you might actually consider those quote unquote competitors as collaborators. And one of the benefits of that is being able to have multiple people pulling in the same direction and getting more done. Another thing is path to market, right? So, finding those ideal referral partners is really important, and being able to like capture more and more business beyond your own activities. So yeah, that's right. So for example, with the pet cemetery, I noticed just down the road there was a dog wash, so same obviously user, which is the dog, same target customer, which is the dog owner, just at different stages of the life cycle. But obviously, each company does something complementary, so there's a lot of cross-referral possible. And even within the artistic space as well, there's a lot of referral possible, because effectively each company is a filter and a path to market, like a channel, right?
Yeah. So what other forms of support is available domestically in Australia for those who want to collaborate with others?
Yeah, so I'll take you through the fullness of like digital solutions. So it used to be called the Australian Small Business Advisory Service. Yep. And effectively what you've got access to, if you have an ABN, you're for profit, and you have less than 20 staff. You've got access. I mean, there is a bit of a saturation of webinars and workshops, a little less. I mean, if they're high quality workshops, they're definitely worth your while. We do run events as well. So they tend to be like grandiose versions of the workshops. Yeah. So running one tonight, actually. And then the thing that really sets it apart is you're able to receive personalized advice from one of like almost 100 different advisors that covers about 100 different microdisciplines, which are related to setting up a small business. Because if you break down all the constituents of building a business, there's, it could be anywhere from clarifying your LinkedIn strategy through to your event strategy, through to your, branding and positioning and go-to-market strategy or ClickFunnels or whatever. Yeah. There's actually a lot of support that you need. And rather than trying to a big mistake that we can make is try to become experts at all of these things, because we just literally don't have time. Yeah. So what we can do is borrow someone's mind for the duration of an hour to understand how they would do it.
Yeah.
And so that's really the digital solutions. There's also, so that's federally funded, and then there is the Small Business Development Corporation, which is state funded. In WA, we don't have, we've got R&D tax credit scheme, but we don't have the MVP, the prototyping grants that they do across in New South Wales or Victoria. So hopefully that will be addressed. Also, it's important to kind of mention that there is an online summit coming up called WA Unleashed 2021, and that is going to be heavily sponsored by Digital Solutions, because it's, so effectively what we're doing what we tell other people to do, which is to collaborate with people that are already doing something in this. So we could say, WA Unleashed, they're our competitor.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can just co-opt your competitors, and that you become a bigger, more unified, more integrated service provision, right? Okay. So that's a really, really good opportunity to do that. And also I might mention that we also use the advisors ourselves internally. So we have advisors come and advise us on the running of Business Station. Yep. So we definitely, I guess, walk the talk on these items.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Maybe more specifically for ecom, what are some ways those types of business owners can collaborate?
Yeah, so the first stage is always a general meeting, typically, unless you happen to know what you need already. Sometimes you're fully aware of the full gamut of things that's required for you to move forward. Sometimes it's less clear, and we've often had people not knowing what they need. And so having half an hour to an hour conversation with someone like myself, almost like a general practitioner, allows us to explore where the strengths and the weaknesses of the current approach are, and where you might be able to source more support. So it's a very personalized kind of discussion that we would have. And then understanding that. So, typically I start with asking questions, like quite generic, like what are the top 3 to 5 kind of challenges that you're experiencing right now? And it does depend on industry. So e-commerce would be no different, because it kind of cuts across a lot of different industries. So it would all be dependent on that conversation. But we have that available. So it's, but sometimes you'll know, okay, I need to upgrade my PR strategy, for example. So we've got an advisor for that. Or, maybe you're concerned about cybersecurity.
Yeah.
A lot of people aren't until it's too late. Or various other things. And, there's actually a database full of advisors. You can just go and search for the need that you might have, even if it's around grants. Yep. So we've got an expert that you can talk to just about grant programs, specialists in those areas. And they can, so you don't have to research everything yourself, because if you'd have to set aside like a couple of days to really get that understood.
Yeah. So what about help from overseas? You said that you work with companies from the UK. Is it worth for a local business to collaborate with people overseas?
I think it can be. And one of the reasons why it can be is that across in Australia, we do have some reasonably entrepreneurial cities in Melbourne and Sydney, but the other major capitals aren't necessarily highly entrepreneurial. And that's because of the makeup of the economy, right? Being, well, it used to be entrepreneurial mining maybe a couple of 100 years ago. Yeah. Particularly, around the Kalgoorlie days, I went out there and obviously explored quite a bit. Yeah. But now I think we've moved past mining being entrepreneurial and onto technology being that driving force. But there are other, obviously, countries that don't have an abundance of land and natural resources that they can just tap into. And so those countries have had to innovate a lot more than we have through necessity, right? So definitely the UK, obviously the parts of the US, but if you look at where the innovation is happening, it's definitely towards, the main cities, the cities like, San Francisco, New York, and Boston, and places like that. So it's not the whole of the US. So you have to be clear on where you're looking. And obviously London and Paris and Berlin and Canada are pretty high up on the list. Typically we look at the UK because that's the country we understand the most, and we're also connected in with an angel syndicate across there, which provides access to about 20,000 investors. And I've visited, the physical angel investment meetings there, and there were e-commerce businesses pitching various models. So yeah, that's. But one thing to say is that you always need to think about who needs to be involved in your business, and does this person actually exist in the Commonwealth of Australia? And sometimes it's not the case, particularly if you're looking to internationalize, and particularly if you're looking for someone with an extra 10 or 15 years experience to what you currently possess. You might have to look outside of the country. But yeah, I mean, it's a personal kind of relationship that you would actually create with the person that will come on board as an executive or as a coach to help you progress to that next level. But yeah, we've found it to be very powerful in helping clarify ventures and their strategies over the course of time.
Yeah, cool. Second topic I want to talk about is investing in e-commerce businesses. So is it common for e-commerce businesses to actually receive funding?
Yeah, I think to put it into context, as I mentioned, at previous events, most businesses don't receive capital, or if they do, it comes from people that they know, like and trust, or people that know, like and trust them.
Okay.
So that's most of the capital that goes into ventures comes from either the founders or the actual, friends and family and fans, we might call them.
Yep.
And so in that respect, it's important to be wary that, you need a very mature business to start to, be interesting to investors. And you sort of need to be able to put your investor proposition in front of a lot of people. So there are mechanisms for doing that, right? And angel syndicates can be one of them. But yeah, I mean, you can actually, by involving the right people in your executive board and gradually get them to buy in, you start to have more and more paths to capital start to form, right? So that's always worth keeping in mind. And yeah, I have seen e-commerce businesses pitch for capital, and I've seen them receive capital. And I think it's a reasonably well understood model. It just then comes down to the individual investor, like what their risk appetite is, like what stage are they willing to invest in, and what their ticket size is. And one of the critiques that is kind of leveled at the Australian landscape is typically lower than it should be. But even so, I mean, if you gradually bring people into the business that happen to have capital and you can convince to invest, then you might be able to create your own investors.
Yeah, that's true. I guess the other side of the coin, I guess you could say, is like when an e-commerce business actually has funding, like what should they do with that money? Because some people might just be like, I'm just going to spend all this money on inventory so I can sell more. Whereas others might be like, I might invest in systems, but I don't know. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, so how our model works is that typically before the capital's raised, a certain amount of due diligence happens, right, across a whole variety of different areas. And if it's quite an early stage business, then quite a considered like execution plan needs to be put together at almost an operational level. At least an investor level of planning is required. And so what you would do is you would co-create that with your probably startup coach or your non-executive director, and they would sort of be able to vouch for the fact that it's been co-created with them. So you get that kind of credibility boost, but it also comes under constant scrutiny of a third party, which is good. So the way it kind of works as companies evolve is that strategy is developed in kind of parallel to the execution piece. But if you have someone involved that has a lot of experience, then they can look at what you've created and add a lot of value by clarifying a lot of elements to it that you haven't yet come across because you just haven't come across certain situations or certain initiatives that could be implemented to help you accelerate. So that's the situation more globally.
Yeah. So if an e-commerce business owner wants to approach an investor, what would be the best way to do that?
Yeah. So typically, you would try to find someone that had access into capital networks, be they angel syndicates. If you're really doing well, I guess that's in the VC kind of realm. And so our job at Startup Vault is to kind of collect these providers. So sort of build up two sides of the marketplace. You know, you've got your founders doing a pretty good job, and then wanting to sort of collaborate to take the business to the next level by adding strategic team members at an executive level. And then those people have their own capital networks that when they're comfortable, introductions will be made and the kind of conversation will be around, you know, how close is this particular venture to the investment criteria. And that's the tricky part, right? You sort of have to prepare quite well to go for the investment because you've only got one chance to make a first impression. But at the same time, you sort of need to tease out of the investor, like whether, what their sort of criteria for investment is, or how far is the venture away from being something that they would consider to be investable. Now, internally, we've got our own definition of what investability, what is an investable venture. And that's gone through a lot of, there's been a lot of ventures that have gone through that process. I think the current count is about 79. And that's an agreement between all the stakeholders, the advisors, the founders, and the investors. And that's the way it needs to be. Otherwise, then one person is saying that this is the definition of investment readiness and another is saying something else. So there is quite a bit of synchronizing that has to happen.
So up to the last question. It's like a tradition on the podcast. So we call it your call to action. So in the podcast, we ask our guests to provide a call to action to help inspire our listeners to actually do something about a problem in their business. So what's your call to action for the week?
My call to action is, maybe go onto the Business Station website, take a look at the advisor list, and give it a shot. Give yourself the opportunity to test bringing in more people into the business, although they don't need to stay there, obviously. So you can test the advisory model, see how it works for you, see how much value it creates. And it's a risk-free trial as well. It's like $0. But also think more broadly as well, like go through and figure out who needs to be on your side in order for you to reach your goals. Think in terms of who rather than how.
Awesome. Well, thank you for appearing on the show. Is there any shout outs if anyone wants to get in contact with you?
Yeah. I've got my own kind of profile on Business Station, so people are, we can provide that as a link. People can go and book me if they want. I typically get quite busy with all the events that I'm running, but always happy to kind of have a conversation with people and see, if there's a way that we can help them. And in most cases, there is. So yeah, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for appearing on the show. Guys, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Let us know who you want to see on the podcast as well. We're keen to find out who you want to listen to. So until next time, see you guys around. Thank you again, Tristan.
Cheers.
See you later.